Back to Ghost. All the way across forecheck. In front. They score! Patrick tips it home. It's a 4-3 hockey game as the kid seems to be enjoying it on the top power play unit. 3-point game for Patrick.
The fourthperiod.com presents the O&B Puckcast, episode number 67. The Flyers are at the trade deadline. I'm your host, Isaiah.
I'm Dan, the Flyer fan.
I'm Chef B.
All right. So Anthony DeMarco is out sick tonight. We wish Anthony the best. He's a trooper. He was basically in until the very last minute. He had to bail out. Have no fear. His co-worker, Dennis Bernstein, we call him DB from thefourthperiod.com, is going to help us preview the trade deadline from a league-wide and, of course, Flyers perspective. So, gentlemen, since our last show, the Flyers went 3-3. Just to give you the latest information about where they're at in the standings, because President's Day, the NHL had a couple games on in the afternoon, and the ones of interest to us would be Florida defeating San Jose 5-3, and Arizona defeating the Islanders. The upshot of all of that is that the Flyers are still holding down the second wild card spot, 59 games. They're 32-20-7 for 71 points. Right behind them is Florida with 66 points with one game in hand. And the Flyers have a differential of plus 16. That's an improvement. But, you know, even though they went 3-3, they're really on a hot streak. They've gone 6-3-1 in their last 10. And, of course, we'll talk a little bit later about the home and home they have with a depleted Columbus Blue Jacket squad. But, gents, why don't we talk about the first game? And we talked about it the last show, Chef. The Flyers in one of those trap game situations. They didn't fall for it in Detroit, but they came home after a really successful road skid there, and they lost 5-0 to the New Jersey Devils. Mackenzie Blackwood looked every bit the competitor to Carter Hart that a lot of Devils fans think he'll be. That was a tough game.
At the beginning of the season, when we did our season previews, I think I got the Devils, and I remember saying, like, I didn't think they were going to be much, but boy, were they going to be just a pain in the ass for the Flyers, and it turned out to be that was the case. I mean, they came out flat. They didn't forechecking was weak, and they just didn't execute, and I think I said on the show before that, I think I was more worried about the trap games than I was about the big games coming up against Tampa and Isles. I mean, I just thought that they were going to have a hard time just getting into this game, and it happened. So it was.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the typical scenario in a situation like that is they fall behind, you get a soft goal, and then it looked like it might as well be 1995 Devils. I mean, it's uncanny how they sometimes, not so much this year, but sometimes the Devils just have the Flyers number, and you know, and of course one of the stars of that game, Blake Coleman's not even on the team. We'll talk to DB about that a little bit later. Dan, any thoughts before we get to the good news?
Just an ugly game. When they beat the Red Wings, we should have known that they were going to drop the game against the Devils. But yeah, one of those games that you just kind of come to expect. I guess, like you said, the 1995 kind of Devils game where they just bore the Flyers to death. That's what happened there, and they came out strong, and the Flyers just, took them probably a little lightly going in, and they dropped that game, but they just, they can't focus on the bad losses at this point in the season.
No. I mean, they were coming off that win versus Detroit and Colorado, and like I said, they're 6-3-1 in their last 10. But Dan, the really good news came a couple nights later against the Capitals, as the Flyers really just played one of their games of the year, just demolished the Caps at Washington, which made it all the more eye-opening. It's just everything you could hope for. And not that the Caps weren't threatening for a while, but it was a Flyers game most of the way.
It was the Flyers game most of the way. The offense was cooking. The penalty kill was very good that game after the officiating was questionable. Couturier had 2 goals and an assist. Drew had a goal and 2 assists. That was the Bobby Kubel looked like a freaking phenom out there. Yeah. It was a strong showing for everybody that game. And like you said, one of the highlights of the season.
Yeah, there's no question. And, so after the disappointment versus the Devils, what a great game. And then a couple nights later, the Flyers are at home versus the Florida Panthers, who at that point were still in the running. The Flyers played a really good game, Chef. They beat Florida 4-1, and they looked like they were on a roll. Carter Hart was really good because it was a weird game. I felt like the Flyers really beat the Caps pretty handily. And the thing about Florida is Florida didn't have as many total chances. Maybe I'm wrong about that. I don't have the data right in front of me. But I know one thing. They had a lot of prime chances that they just could not convert.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't think it was so much. It was more quality chances. When they had their shots, their chances to plug away and get a goal, they didn't miss. The only thing I think that saved them was the fact that Carter Hart had such a strong game. You're right. So I mean, it was good to see them put 2 in a row, 2 solid games in a row, back to back. And it kind of makes you feel all right. Okay, maybe that was just a hiccup because 4 weeks ago, everybody's like, "Oh, we were stuck drinking the Flyers Kool-Aid again this year, and this team sucks." And but now, ever since the West Coast trip, they kind of stabilized it. They don't seem to. It's good. They don't seem to have 2 bad back-to-back games anymore. So that makes me optimistic about the future here. And if they get into playoffs, that could be a really big difference.
Yeah, the Flyers have shown the propensity, Dan, to beat really good teams. We talked about it last show, and while Florida is still kind of, I don't know, you could call them a good team, just yet, especially the way Bob is playing goal these days. But going back to back with those games was really one of the high points of the season, and I think it showed that the Flyers clearly are a step, well, more than one step, but several steps above where they were last year.
Yeah, taking down the big teams really has not been a huge issue for them. I feel far more confident when they play a team like the Capitals or Panthers than I do when they play a team like the Red Wings, which probably isn't good, but, it's just kind of the way they are. So there are not many teams that I don't think that they could beat at any given time of the season anymore.
Yeah. One thing in that game, and I was listening to Colby Cohen today. He was on with Russ Joy at ESPN radio this evening, and he was talking about Phil Myers and how the Flyers just feel that, he has had enough AHL seasoning, and they're willing to live with some of the mistakes that he makes, and they're going to kind of grin and bear it. They don't want to kill his confidence. But one thing, sometimes he gets aggressive. In that Florida game, the Flyers are 3-1. There's 30 seconds left in the second, and he just makes a dumb play. And I'm not trying to pick on him per se, but I guarantee you the coaches took him aside, and he's trying to go for something that could end up going the other way against a team that really can burn you. If you just give them high-quality chances, they'll really make you pay. So just word to the wise. But this is what Phil Myers is going to be this year. Next year, he could end up getting benched a little bit. But this is his learning year, and that play with such little time left in that period, that's time, place, score. But talking about defensemen, Dan, Robert Hagg is a good NHL defenseman this year. Whether you talk about save percentage, whether he hasn't been a minus player, even Charlie O'Connor said, well, the underlying metrics aren't that great, but he really has been better.
I mean, he's so far improved of what he was in the past, and I think it just comes down to general usage. I think, under Dave Haxtell's system, he was relied upon in situations that he had no business being in, and then it becomes, kind of a landslide. The play goes bad, he goes bad, people sour on him, people, hold the grudges against him, and I think that's what a lot of the fans are still doing as far as why they hate him. It's the Robert Hagg of the past that they just can't wait to pick a mistake and tear it apart. And I mean, he's been great. Maybe not great, but a far improved player. He's a perfectly fine third pair NHL defenseman. And at this point, that's probably all you can ask from him. And he's not going to make the flashy plays like Myers or Sanheim, but he's also not going to be such a high risk, high reward like Myers, Sanheim. So he is what he is, and at this point, going forward, I mean, has certainly earned his spot in the lineup for the time being.
Well, you need guys like him, and it's not assured that we're going to bring back Justin Braun last year. So the idea that Robert Hagg is showing some things and maybe benefiting from the tutelage or just being out on the ice with somebody who's a veteran like Justin Braun, who may or may not be here, I see a benefit in that, and I. Especially with all the hijinks with Shane Gostisbehere, we have to get into that. I definitely think he's going to have a place on this team going forward, whereas coming into the year, I looked at him as a disposable piece or a guy who just wouldn't be brought back even after the year.
I think it was Jordan Hall that tweeted out that he had gone like 18 games without being a minus player. Yeah, here it is. I found it. And he is a plus 14 in that stretch with 6 points, and the Flyers' third most block shots at 23. I mean, Dan isn't far off by saying he's been great down this last stretch, because he has been. And like you said about the flashy players, like I think everybody's in love with Myers and Sanheim because of what they could be, and they don't realize what they have. They just have somebody. Not everybody in this league, you can't even afford it to be first or even second pair D. So you need these solid, dependable, stay-at-home guys. Granted, he did score a power play goal the other day, and Twitter blew up. I love that because I think it's just funny. It's very entertaining. But, you need somebody on that third pair that's going to be, reliable. And that's what he's been. He's been very reliable.
Yeah, and what does that mean? That means he blocks shots, he makes the right play at the right time. He's probably doing a little bit better job with his outlet passing, and that's what the more analytically inclined will lean upon when criticizing Robert Hagg, is that you don't go take with his passes, and he's just not getting out of the zone fast enough. He's always playing defense. Whereas a guy who doesn't block as many shots is better at zone denials and gets the puck out and plays less defense. It's better, but you're not always going to be able to do that. And when you are on the penalty kill or something like that, you're kind of hemmed in your zone, especially as a defenseman. Mm-hmm. So you can't get away from that, and that's why, I talked about earlier that you're going to need a guy like that. I'm not sure what the status of Justin Braun is going forward. Shane Gostisbehere, we'll talk about a little bit later. But, yeah, so it's good to see Robert Hagg improve. That's a good thing. Leave the guy alone. Let him just play defense the way he has to play defense to be an asset to the team. But, Chef, let me go back to you. Now, going into the Islanders game, the Flyers had the best third period differential in the NHL. So they go into the island the next night after that Florida victory. They were down 3-0. They just lost it in that, what was like a minute to go. After tying it up 2 minutes ago. And there's so much to talk about there. I'll hand it over to you, and then we'll get. This is such a deep game for Flyers fans. We'll get Dan's comments as well.
Yeah, it was a shame. I think I jumped off my couch and jumped up and down. I don't think I didn't even dare to move like that anymore, because it felt like a playoff game. It felt like oh yes, this is what I guess it's because we get so emotionally invested in these games, and it was awesome. And then I was like, all right, so we're gonna go to overtime. I think I like our chances. 3-on-3, and then like 38 seconds later, it was 38.86 seconds later, it's like somebody kick you in the nards. It was such a letdown, because I didn't know that there's a lot of people were yelling at what the hell this line was doing out there or that line was doing out there at the end of the game. But I guess you got to understand that you had all your best your best players on the game on ice to get to the game to tied. I mean, they were exhausted. I think they took a timeout too, and they were probably exhausted after all that. But I mean, it was a shame to let that one slip away. At least I would have liked, as other people with podcasts call it the loser point, I would have loved to walk away with a loser point after that one, though.
Well, you got to get one. I mean, the Flyers fell behind 3-0, and at the first, again, the lousy starts. We witnessed that, over the weekend, and and the Flyers, Elliott played that game. And he wasn't necessarily bad, but it was one of those we need a save situations. Anyway, Couturier ties it up late in the game. And then, you can talk about what happened after the Flyers, tied the game up. And I think it was a failure from the coach on down. I know they just had their best guys on for 6-on-5 to tie it and all that. But what the hell is the B team doing on defense out there? Sanheim and Myers are not the guys that went out there to protect that loser point at the very least that they should have had. And what the heck is JVR doing out there?
Yeah, not entirely sure what they were thinking. My guess is what they were thinking was that was not going to go immediately back to their end. They were probably going to go and try and win that game, rather than have it trapped in their own zone. Myers lost his man, and then JVR can't cover anybody. That's what ended up happening. They were probably thinking, all right, we're going to go out there, we're going to go score another one real quick. And that's probably why they were out there. But in the same breath, why put those guys out there in the situation? But I think the bigger story of that game is that they were down 3-0 in the first period.
Yeah.
These slow starts are just absolutely killing them. And Lord, what we know we would see against Camp Bay a couple days later after that. But that was like the most Flyer game we've seen in quite some time. Down 3-0, fight all the way back in the last minute, and then blow it, with 30 seconds left in the game. And that was just peak Flyers right there. Just fuming after that game.
Well, that's what they did a lot last year.
Yeah.
We saw a lot of that where they, were down by so much, and then of course they just lose. They couldn't even grab a loser point. Yeah, that was tough. And I got to get on AV. That was one of the few times this year where I felt like he needed to do a better job too on that one. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
The worst part about it all is that if you look at the standings, it would have flipped the Flyers and the Islanders in the standings easily, because the Islanders wouldn't have got their 2 points. The Flyers would have. They come back and win that. They don't win today, and Flyers are sitting where the Islanders are right now instead of vice versa.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're going to do that a lot. There's a couple games that fall into that category. Yeah, no question. So, Dan, I got to turn to you on this next little item. So, I think in between the Islander game and the Panther game down in Florida, Morgan Frost has returned to Lehigh Valley, and there are some people, including Ryan Gilbert, who made the case that Morgan Frost belongs in the NHL. And I, for one, who's watched him a little bit, read a lot of reports about him, listened to, some people who follow the minor leagues, I don't buy it. But you watch every game. You're down there a lot in the Lehigh Valley at the games. Well, what say you?
Yeah, I'm at a vast majority of Fandom's home games. I think I've only missed one that Frost was at this season. And he's much improved from what he was in October, and I'll give him that. And during his recent call-up, he played, 2-3 games, and he didn't royally screw anything up, which is an improvement from his first time around. So he's getting there, and he's scoring goals. I believe he had 3 points in the 2 games that he's been sent back down, or whatever it was, 2 points. And that's nice and dandy and all, but it was never about his offense. It was about his game away from the puck, his defensive ability, his decisions with the puck. That's the kind of stuff that is lacking, and that is very noticeable if you're watching these games. And, he's got the offensive ability, and that's great, but there's more to it than that, especially when you don't have the offensive ability that can make up for it. If he could come into the NHL and his defensive ability wasn't there, but he had the playmaking ability of Connor McDavid, some things could be forgiven. But he's just not at a complete level yet where you can say that he is your third-line center, especially in a third-line center, because you need to be defensively responsible from that role. And he's just not there yet. He's coming along, but at this point in time, he is an AHL-level player, and there's nothing wrong with that. Just because he was a first-round pick does not mean that he has to be in the NHL right away. It takes time for players to develop. Everybody grows at their own pace. And I'm sure he gets called up at least one more time. It wouldn't surprise me at this rate. But at the same time, just letting him down there marinate for the rest of the season. I mean, the Phantoms aren't making the playoffs. They're nowhere close at this point. Right. But just let him go down there and learn. There's nothing wrong with development. And I get everybody wants him up, and I get he's a flashy prospect. But at this point in time, the best thing for him, both now and in the future, is just let him learn a little bit. It is possible to ruin these players if you throw them into the water. Look at the friggin' Edmonton Oilers. How many picks did they have that they ruined over the years? And I'm not saying they're going to ruin him, but you got to be careful with these kind of guys. Let him go down there and develop. It doesn't hurt the player at all. And if anything, it's just going to help him in the long term.
Yeah, let me just add a couple things. When I see him out there, I see a guy who shies away from contact. Yes. Along the boards. And it's not like he's, being timid, because he doesn't play timid. He makes a lot of bold plays out there. But he's not stupid either. He needs more man strength, more physical growth and maturity. And it's not like he's dominating at the AHL level. Then, to me, that's where you make the case, like, God, you're holding them back. What are you doing? And that's when you write an impassioned article making the case for Morgan Frost. Not when he's like, okay, well, he looks like one of the better players in the AHL, but he's not really outstanding, which is how I describe him right now.
When he got sent down in December, I saw a lot of people go, oh, but there's no talent down there with the Phantoms. And it's true. They don't have a lot. They called up most everybody, and a couple of players were hurt at that point. But I want Frost to go down there with not a whole lot of talent, because I want him to put the team on his back. Show me that he has something, and if he can go down there and carry that group of guys that is not the best, that's even better. I'm sure you want him to go down there with, Ratcliffe and Farabee and Rubtsov and all these players and let them kind of develop and bloom as a group, which would be great. But at the same time, let's see something out of Frost as an individual that kind of pushes him to that level. And I just haven't seen that yet.
No, not at all. I think there's no wow factor with him other than a couple flashes. And I'm not down on the player. Don't get me wrong. He's their most important prospect. In 2-3 years, you'll be wanting 50, 60 points from him as, players like Drew and Voracek, if he's still here, are aging out. And I say, put a little development in the bank. The AHL is a development league. The NHL is a winners league. And they don't have any time for guys to try and get their development in the NHL unless you're a loser team like Ottawa. It's over, it's not happening. Okay, throw the kids out there. Okay, fine. So anyway, enough with that. I hope the Flyers are prudent. We'll talk to DB about maybe some opportunity for the Flyers to add some players that will help keep Morgan Frost down in the AHL where he belongs. Especially, imagine the way Frost is playing now in playoff hockey. Don't see it, not yet. Well, I hope to very soon, but not right now. Chef, a couple days later, Mark Freeman is promoted. Sanheim is a little banged up. Barkov fell on his leg in the was that what happened? Oh, that was in Florida. We'll get that. Anyway, Freeman was called up. And at what game did Ghost play? Was he in the Islander game?
Let's see here.
Or was that the Devils game?
The Devils game, yeah.
Devils, way back.
Right. Okay. So he had a knee arthroscopy. He took some cartilage, shaved it out. Usually a 3-4 week injury, but you never know. He turned the wrong way, you can aggravate it, and his knee was sore. So Freeman's up. But then there's this issue of Ghost kind of knows where he stands here, and barring what I consider a miracle, he's probably out of here. And
definitely.
After this year. And maybe, Chef, Ghost has been told by his agent that to really, really, really make sure he's healthy before he comes back. So give it more time, especially past February 24th.
Yeah, of course, waiting game. But Friedman, when he came up, he didn't play bad. I actually liked him. I thought he was fair. He pulled his weight. But Ghost, I've been saying it for last year. I'm not sold on Ghost, and I wouldn't be terribly upset if he went somewhere else. But if he's going to be playing, I think I saw a report that when he came back on the ice, that he took a shot when he was during warm-ups or practice or something, and he missed it, and he got so pissed off he threw his stick over the glass and ran back to the locker room and was pissed off or whatever. But if we're going to get games, mind games, and these, I guess what I'm saying is if he's going to pretend to be more hurt than he really is just to get past the trade deadline so it's something looks better for him after the fact, and I'm not saying he's doing that, but you never know. And you do things in your own best interest, but I don't see him as a viable piece. Now, as a trade piece, I don't know. Maybe I think we'll probably talk about it more of that later, but I don't see him as a future prospect, future on this team.
No, I don't either. In his defense, supposedly when he was shooting or a play right before that, he kind of tweaked it, and then when he went to shoot, he really felt that. So I can't divine what was going on in his head, and I don't know the situation, but I wouldn't have mentioned the scenario that I did unless I had heard from some people who have some strong feelings about what Shane has been like over the last couple of years and how tough he has been at times to coach and things like that. Dan, any comments?
I saw somebody on Twitter a couple days back say something like, "Oh, well, the coach soured on Gostisbehere," and I go, "Well, hold on now. This is his third coach since he's been with the Flyers.
Yep.
It's been multiple coaches, multiple people, multiple systems that he's failed at, and there's always been some kind of excuse. And I just don't think there's room for him here anymore. I think AV's in for the long haul now, and I pretty much agree with you. I don't see a way that this resolves itself. I don't think he's gone at the deadline just because of his cap hit. It's going to be a pain to move. I think it's more of a summer deal. But yeah. I don't really see this guy in the future, especially with Sanheim and Myers, evolving and continuing to get better. You kind of had too many cooks in the offensive defenseman kitchen, especially Evan Provar, who's coming along in the power play even. So he's just he was a special attraction when he got here. He was the first one. He was ripping 17 goals as a rookie, and he's just, it's been a long time since we've seen that player. these 65-point season 2 years ago. That was the anomaly thus far. He's a 30-point guy if you're lucky. And if you're a season like this, when he just seems like just a complete, intolerable guy to handle out there. And, I don't know if he's milking this injury or not, but whatever it is, it's just ironic that it comes up right around the trade deadline. But, yeah, I really don't see a way that this guy is here for the duration of his contract at this point.
No, that I don't see. Generally, injured players are not traded. It has happened, but I don't think that something like that would happen in a trade deadline. But we got to get rolling along because DB's joining us soon enough. Let me see here. So after that disappointment with the Islanders, the Flyers go into Florida, and they had that Florida trip where they go to the Panthers and then the Lightning. They traditionally have not done well with that, but the Flyers pretty much came out ready to play, jumped on them, and jumped out to a 3-0 lead, and held off a little push by the Panthers and coasted midway through the third. JVR a goal and two assists, and Carter Hart, when he was called upon, made some timely saves, and Robert Hagg with another exciting performance, including was that the one where he got the power play goal, right?
Yep.
Yep, late in the game. So so the Flyers win that one 6-2, and then they have to go to Tampa Bay. And Schiff, frustrating game. Again, a lot like the script against the Islanders, but. Not good enough. They what were they down 3-0?
I think so. I was stuck at work. I only, what did I say? I saw the last 3 minutes of the game because we were so busy at my work. It was, Saturday night after Valentine's Day. We were slammed. So, but we came out, me and my sous chef, we came out with 3 or 4 minutes left in the game, and boom, and that's what we saw. It's like, oh no, came out to see that, see them lose it. But oh well. I mean, like you said, generally the Florida trips were not good, and so you walk away with half the points that you should have. But this time in the season, every one of them hurts.
Yeah, that sounds like Gigi is particularly upset by that particular game. Yeah.
Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. Yeah, she's all bark, no bite. Dan, what were your impressions watching the Flyers lose to the Lightning in a game that they competed very well in the final 2 periods?
It was a game that I don't think the Flyers necessarily even played that bad. It's just especially the first period, just every single mistake the Flyers made, the Bolts made them pay for it. And it was just clear that they were head and shoulders the best team in that game. They came out in the second. The Flyers said, all right, we're not going to take it. They started to fight back and quite literally fight back and all kinds of scrums. And they got on the board. It was 3-0. It was 3-1 when Provorov scored. Third period comes around. Again, Flyers fight back, but it's too little too late. And I don't even think it was that bad of a game. It's just bizarre how it happened. It's hard to take down a team like Tampa and how good they are, and I believe that was their second 10-game win streak of the season. And when you do things like that, it's insane. And obviously they're one of the best regular season teams around. And I said it during the game, and I'll stand by it. They're probably one of the only teams in the East that I genuinely fear right now meeting up in the playoffs. And I know people go, oh, Columbus can beat them, but I don't know about it this year. They seem pretty scary. They're the only team that I would have no faith the Flyers could beat in a 7-game series. And that game it was rough. It was I don't think it was as bad as the score sheet says, but it was not a pretty game.
No, and the Flyers pulled within 4-3 on a Claude Giroux goal, and then AV pulls the goalie again. And Kucherov puts it in the empty net for the 5-3 final. But, yeah, they were behind the 8 ball. Again, chased the game. Carter Hart had, I think, was that the second goal? I think he wasn't a great goal. That's a tough one. There was a bad line change. For the third goal, AV made a point of talking about that. And listen, overall, the Flyers are having a good year. I'm not going to obsess on one game. And I like the fact that AV is pointing out these things. He's holding guys accountable, and that's something we've had only selectively over the last several years.
Yeah,
So,
it's nice to see that AV is he's not been afraid to call players out or call himself out or that kind of stuff. Whereas Dave Hagstall, who cares? We're gonna bench all the kids because why not? And who cares? And we're gonna play Robert Hagg for 30 minutes a night, so everybody can hate him for the next 10 years afterwards. It is nice. It's just a totally refreshing thing to have AV as coach, because he's brought so much to this table that we just haven't seen for a long time under Dave Hagstall and really Craig Berube as well.
Right. And obviously, Berube has done a better job, and I think the Flyer experience was a good one for him. But
Yes.
and you really add to Tampa. You talked about Tampa, then they add Blake Coleman, a Flyer killer already. So that makes them a little more deadly. That's a really good deal for the Lightning. A guy like Blake Coleman's got another year left on his deal. We'll talk to DB about that a little bit more. That's where the Flyers are at. The road ahead is going to be very interesting. We're going to preview that just briefly after we're done with DB. We're going to talk about the number of games that the Flyers have and all that kind of stuff. Then we'll have a big announcement about our next show. And with that, we're ready to bring on Dennis Bernstein from thefourthperiod.com. And we are back with Dennis Bernstein, NHL insider, senior writer for thefourthperiod.com, and involved with the Hot Stove podcast on SiriusXM NHL, and of course with the Mayor John Hoven, kings of the podcast. We call him DB. Hey, thanks for doing this, DB.
Hey, always great to join you guys on O&B. It's a pleasure. I literally got off the plane from Colorado Springs about an hour or so ago, but happy to jump on and talk trade deadline with you.
Yeah, no, I really do appreciate that. And speaking of which, I have to ask you about the outdoor game that you were just at, where the Kings upset the Avalanche. But the story coming out of that game was the traffic situation and what appeared to be inadequate accommodations for that kind of event.
Yeah, well, look, here's the thing. Like, if you go into that type of event, and I think the people that may have gone to the Big House and seen the game between Toronto and Detroit, maybe could have given an opinion on what to do. You got to get there early. I mean, guys, you got to really it's important to get there early. Now, look, I got in an hour earlier because it was media gates were open at 3 as opposed to 4, right? But I get that. But if you think you're going to drive up from Denver on a 2-lane highway to Colorado Springs, about 70 miles, and think you're going to make it in time for the game, if you leave around 3 or 4 o'clock, you were crazy. Right now, the issue was because of the cool military theme that they had, which was amazing, right?
Right.
Part of the issue was when you get to the when you get to the Air Force Academy, right? It's a military installation, so everybody's got to show their ID at the gate, and then they let you through. So it's not like you just drive into the lot and you're fine. You pay your $20 or whatever. So there's, you have to understand what you're traveling into, and that was part of the issue. Is everybody had to stop, and it's a 2-lane highway, and there's only 2 entrances to the Air Force Academy. So imagine going to Citizen Bank Ballpark for a baseball game or playoff game, and there's 2 gates to get in, right? It's not or Wells Fargo. If they only had 2 gates to get in, you'd have the same issues, and plus, the stadium's in the middle of nowhere. It's basically you driving by the highway, like, oh, wow, there's a little valley, and there's the stadium. So there's nothing around it. So it was difficult. Look, I'm sympathetic towards those people because it was a unique situation. But I think the lesson learned here is if you're going to go to one of these events, guys, it's got to be you got to get there early. You got to get there 3 or 4 hours, and if you're just going to hang out in the parking lot or whatever, fine. Once people got into the stadium, and I know the players' wives were stuck on the bus, and they didn't get there for 2 minutes to go in the first period. So it wasn't just like the fans who were penalized on this. It's just that you just have to get there early. Plus, I don't know if you guys know, there's a tragedy after the game where somebody was killed. And so we were recording our podcast inside Falcon Stadium, and literally the game, I think, ended at 8:30. At 10:30, the parking lot was still jammed. And then at 11 o'clock, by the time we got out of there, it was fine, it was clear. But there were actually people waiting on the side of the road for Ubers at 11 o'clock at night, 2.5 hours after the game in the dark and cold. So it was tough because I think it's just such a unique venue. And they had such great success with the Caps game down in the Naval Academy. They tried to replicate it for them, but it wasn't really set up for this special event, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And, well, at least the Kings won, right?
Yeah, well, at least Tyler Toffoli scored a hat trick to raise his trade value.
Well, I was just gonna get. I was just gonna
Hey,
get.
I went on our podcast. I'll tell you guys, I went on our podcast, and when the mayor did the intros, 15 seconds into the podcast, I'm like, trade him now. Don't let him get back on the plane. Like, walk over to Joe Sakic, say, okay, first round, but second round pick, or draft pick, or whatever. Don't let him get back on the plane. But obviously, he's still with the Kings if they go to Winnipeg. But certainly, hopefully. That'll raise his trade value. If we look at what the Devils did here over the last couple of days, it looks like it's going to be a seller's market.
Well, it could be. And even before any of that went down, it looks like Bill Guerin is trying to put his stamp on the Wild. He lets go of Bruce Boudreau, the coach, and I think was it before or right after that he trades Jason Zucker to the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Yeah, it was before. It was Zucker, the Zucker trade first, because they've been trying to trade Jason for about 2 years now, right? I mean, the Phil Kessel deal that didn't go through.
Right.
And look, here's the deal. If you're a GM, what's the unspoken rule? You have one coat that you can whack. So that was the one bolt in the chamber. He wasn't Billy's guy. I know Billy from way back in the day in New Jersey. He's a good guy, smart guy. He's worked hard. And we'll see if he can turn this franchise around. But when you look at that franchise, they needed to make some trades. And look, Gabby's a really good man. I covered him here in Southern California. I have nothing bad to say about the man. But you guys know the rap. He'll get the team to the playoffs and won't do anything else, right? So that's it. And it wasn't the guy. I assume Bruce will wind up somewhere else coaching at some point. But look, you have the right as a general manager to start fresh. And this team definitely needs to start fresh because you look at their prospect pool, it's not that great. You look at the guys on the team like Zach Parise, who I love, who's a Warrior, but then he's seen his better days. You still have the Ryan Suter contract. Mikko Koivu is about to be an unrestricted free agent. They don't have a lot of strength at center. So there's a lot of work for Billy to do. But I guess he just wants maybe a more modern-day coach like you see with, although, you could talk about modern-day coaches. John Hines didn't work out so great in New Jersey and it really hasn't done so great in Nashville so far. But, Billy has that right. I'm sure when he came on board and he agreed to do the deal that the owner gave him leverage or the latitude to change coaches. Unfortunate, but it's the nature of the possession. And, you look at the talent that's been fired this season, right? So it's I think no one could be shocked, right? When you have a year where Babcock and Laviolette and DeBoer and Gallant get shown the door, it's not going to be. It's no surprise that Gabby was let go.
No, not at all. And when you have those kind of candidates available, you definitely want to cash in on that. So speaking real briefly about the Wild, it looks like their best prospect is yet to come over, Kirill Kaprizov. And that could change next year, and maybe that'll mark a turnaround for them.
Yeah, it could. It's just a lot of work to do there. That's the issue. That's the challenge.
Right. Well, some other deals have already gone down prior to this. Jack Campbell and Kyle Clifford going from the Kings, that you're very familiar with, to Toronto. What do you think of the return for the Kings in that deal?
I don't think it was enough, but it was good. Look. If Jack Campbell wins 6 games, then they get a second-round pick, then it's good enough. Yeah, so I think that's it. Look, it's something with respect to the return, you're talking about a backup goaltender and a guy who's unrestricted or fourth-line player. So a second and third, which is why they wind up, will be the issue. So I think that would be a good return for him. Yeah,
Campbell has been. I'm not going to call him a godsend, but I tell you, they really need a backup goalie. It's something awful. Yep. Because that's.
We have some breaking news though on the podcast.
What's that?
Tyler Toffoli's going to the Canucks.
Okay, Tyler Toffoli goes to Vancouver, and what's going back to?
Don't know what's coming back yet.
Okay. Breaking: Tyler Toffoli is traded. They almost followed your advice, Dennis.
Mm-hmm. Almost. They waited a couple of days. Right. So, but yes. Hey, look, we'll see what comes back. They were hoping for a second-round pick and a prospect, so we'll see what Vancouver gives up. But he gets and the thing is now he could get reunited with Tanner Pearson. Tanner's done very well in Vancouver, up-tempo offense. That's a really nice fit, to be honest with you.
Yeah, what's going on? Is that a mirage in Vancouver? Or are they really a good team, or is it just
no? Here's the thing: like their forwards are really good, right? The goaltenders, their MVP, and why they haven't signed them yet, I'm not sure why. But I don't think it's a mirage. I think they have really good look, we talk about all the coach of the year prospects, and we talk about obviously Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh, and some of the great jobs. But don't undersell the job Travis Green has done there, because look, they added Tyler Lamont, and look, the JT Miller trade now looks really good for them. Like, he really solidified them. This team got tougher. They're really good up front. I think the one area where they're probably going to have to improve would be on defense. That's the one challenge. So I don't think it's a mirage. Because here's why. The rest of the division isn't any good. So it's not a mirage. Like, if it was the Vancouver Canucks in the Metro Division, Washington and Pittsburgh, it might be a mirage. If it was in the Atlantic with Boston and Tampa, it would be a mirage. Right? But not with this division. They can easily win the division. But I will tell you this. If I'm in this division, I'd rather come in second. Because then I'm going to play the third-place team in this division, which isn't really good. Where if you come in first, you're probably playing a wild card team that's probably probably a better team than the third seed in the division. So I'd be careful with respect to that. But I like Vancouver. I think that they're a little ahead of the curve. I think they're one year away where they thought they would really be a contender. But this season, if they can win the division and be the 2 seed, they've got a shot to get out. Because I really like St. Louis, but what St. Louis is going through with Jay Bouwmeester, it's going to be tough. I want to see how this team was so tight emotionally and so together to have that incident occur. And thank God Jay as well. Yeah. But I think emotionally that's going to take a toll. But at least they have maybe 10 or 15 games to get back on the same track and really get motivated here. So I think this is the year where, and I think you saw it in Arizona where Shika went for it. He traded for Phil. He traded for Taylor Hall because they saw opportunity to get to win the division, get to a 2 seed, and then hopefully maybe even get out of the West to get to the Stanley Cup final. Yeah,
in Arizona, it's in the playoffs they got about 3-point clearance over Nashville and Winnipeg. I don't see Winnipeg with all those problems. Tyler, what's his name? Connor Hellebuck has got to be almost like an MVP of the league with what they're getting out of him.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's really. The thing is with Connor is. Are you going to wipe him out here? And plus, they're not that good defensively, so they would have to add like a guy like
Brendan Dillon, maybe?
Like Alex Martinez. Yeah, they need to add another defenseman, right? So that's a challenge. That's the issue with this team, is that I like what they're doing, but they're going to scrap, and you're going to wear it. Because look, I got Toronto trading for a backup goaltender, but Winnipeg needed a backup goaltender. Brassois is not the guy. They don't have any faith in him. So I think that at this point, if Chevy's going to make any move, and he may not, go find a backup goaltender to support Hellebuck, because he's been great. I just think he's just going to wear out because the defense in front of him hasn't been great. He faces a lot of rubber, maybe the most shots in the league. And then so that's what I do at this point.
No, I can definitely see that. So you look at what's been going on. A lot of pundits think that the trade deadline could be slow, but then we have a couple of deals emanating from New Jersey. Andy Green goes to the Islanders. Blake Coleman goes to the Tampa Bay Lightning in a bigger swap. What do you think of those trades?
Which one do you want to handle first?
Andy Green.
Andy Green? I think that the Devils made a really good trade. They made 2 good trades. I think that the Islanders overpaid for Andy Green. I think he's a rental. He's always on the top pair. It's something that they needed, right? But I think they need goal scoring more. So to give up that pick for a defenseman who's a rental and not address your goal scoring situation, I think it's an overpayment by Lou Lamoriello and good on the Devils. Because, coupled with the other trade, now the Devils have 3 first-round picks in the first round. So they can bounce back if Tom Fitzgerald, and I assume that Marty Brodeur is going to be more of an advisor than Tommy Fitzgerald is going to pull the triggers on these deals.
Right.
It's a really good trade for New Jersey. I think New Jersey won that trade because I just think it's an overpayment for a guy who's really good and could be steady for this team. But they still need to address in the next week another goal scorer, maybe a Kyle Palmieri or and the Toffoli's off the board. I don't think that the Rangers would trade Chris Kreider to the Islanders, so I don't think that's a possibility. But I think they do need to address their goal scoring at this point in time, because again, they lost today against Arizona 2-1. You can see what the problem with this team is when they don't win. It's not because they're poor defensively or have poor goaltending. It's because they can't score goals.
Yeah. If the thing was, I think maybe in Lou's mind, he's thinking we lost Pelech. We got to get somebody in there to plug that hole.
No, I get it. I just think the price for that player is kind of high.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Let's see.
Yeah, David Quenneville and a 2021 second-round pick. You definitely see that for a guy who's on his last legs and he's a UFA. But I think,
it's the prospect. It's the second round pick. I mean, Ken Billings isn't really gonna help that team. It's just a throw in, I guess, at this point.
Right. Now, so Blake Coleman, who's happens to be a Flyer killer, is a guy who really found this game. He is a mid-6 forward. He's got 20 goals this year.
Yep.
And he's signed for next year. He goes for a 2020 first-round pick, which actually was the Vancouver pick from the aforementioned JT Miller trade, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly.
And, and Nolan Foote.
Look, it depends what you believe Blake Coleman is. Is he a 30? Because he's on track for 30 goals. Is he a 30-goal scorer? Probably not. Right? Is he a 25-goal scorer? Well, he scored 21 last year. He improved on it this year. And the problem is he's 28 years old. It's not like you're getting a younger player. You're getting someone who's really kind of, so you put him in that lineup in Tampa, on the third line? You could have a really productive, good player on the third line. So I get the first-round pick. So it depends how you judge where that player fits in Tampa if you want to assess that was too much to give or whatever. Now, the Vancouver pick will probably be in the mid-20s, late 20s, so it's not a terrible payment. But I think the key here is that when people talk about the comparables and stuff like that, Blake Coleman signed for $1.8 million next year. I think that's a huge win for Tampa because they're going to have to make additional moves. And when you fit a player that's that productive at 1.8, and it also shows you that New Jersey really needs to rebuild because normally a guy who scores that many goals at that cheap of a price you would keep on the team. But they need to go back and get better prospects and probably younger prospects. They would need to make the team younger because they have Blake Coleman to trade and they also have Wayne Simmons they need to move out as well. So there's a couple of different players they need to do on that. And that's what so I think that's a nice payment. And again, it depends if you think it's an overpayment, then you think Blake Coleman's a more than 15, 20 goal guy in Tampa than you would think 25 to 30.
Right. Now, I definitely see that. And Tampa's got to worry about the cap next year, and it might be an ideal time for them to lose guys like Tyler Johnson. That's it.
Tyler Johnson, yeah. They're going to have to make additional moves. But look, this team has to be an all-in, right? I mean, they've won 10 in a row, right? They still remember the sting of last season, right? So I got to think that I got to think John Cooper's got to get to a cup final here, right? And he may very well be, but I admire this team because they're able to bring in, guys like Kucherov and Stamkos at a little lower price, and then the ability to go get these players. But that's a really nice trade for them because they really have to do something. They have to have a deep run. Now look, Boston's going to be tough. The Caps are going to be tough. Pittsburgh could be nasty. But right now, you have to handicap the Tampa Bay as the best team in the league right now. The problem is who cares how they are in the regular season? It means nothing. Tampa Bay's, wherever they finish, it's meaningless because anything everybody thinks about is last season, okay? What they did last season, and they fell on their face when they had adversity, and they got punched in the nose the first time. They never got off the deck. So, and you mentioned the type of player that Blake Coleman is. He's got a little bit of sandpaper in him as well. So I think there's a little bit of toughness that he adds to the team. He's a grinder, but he's productive as well. So, like I said, I think it's a necessary move for Tampa because they want another insurance policy in case of an injury or something like that. And I certainly think he'll fit in well. If he can score goals in New Jersey, he can score goals in Tampa.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Just looking at the Western Conference, just to clean that up a little bit, is Joe Thornton going anywhere?
Only if he wants to, and I don't see he's so settled there. And give me the team where you're going to guarantee he's going to go and he's going to win a Stanley Cup because that's the last part of his legacy, right? He's done everything else. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. He's a Hall of Famer on and off the ice. He's so comfortable there. His family lives there. I think the guy that might want to go more would be a guy like would be Patrick Marleau, maybe because he's chasing it because he did leave, right? Patrick went to Toronto, chased it, didn't get it in Toronto. So I think Joe. I would be surprised if he went because I just think he's so comfortable there. And look, I think the big picture is there are great players whose legacies never included a Stanley Cup, right? There's a goaltender in New York who may never win a Stanley Cup, right? Jerome McGinley left without winning a Stanley Cup. Shane Doan didn't win a Stanley Cup. All great players. So it depends on Joe's feelings. And if you're going to give me the team, if they're going to trade him to Tampa or back to Boston to help, then I say, okay, maybe you want to have that run for 3 or 4 months. if they're thinking about Calgary or Vancouver, I couldn't see Joe going there because Joe's going to control his destiny, obviously. It'd have to be a perfect fit, to be honest with you. And I just think Joe's so comfortable there. And I think he's a different cat, right? Because I know him really well. He loves playing the game. He's passionate. I saw him in Vegas for the awards. I go, Joe, so what's the deal? He goes, I got 5 more good years left. So he's just a very, very unusual guy. I just think he loves being in San Jose. He's comfortable there. The family's comfortable there. So unless it was, like I said, a perfect dead-on fit where he was really confident that he could win a Stanley Cup, I think he's staying.
Okay. One place I could see him going, especially with a little bit of concern over the Kadri injury, might be a place like Colorado, but that's about the only place. Sometimes they don't mind staying.
Well, see, and that's the issue. Like, Colorado's jammed up now, right? Because you mentioned the Kadri injury. Now, Grubauer got hit by his own guy the other night in Colorado Springs, and he's out indefinitely with a lower body injury. And I don't think that those 2 goaltenders were great anyway. So if you want to talk about a huge trade that we've heard, and I know you've heard this suggest before, that Kreider and Hank, they had the cap space to do it. That would help their scoring, would help their goaltending. But I agree with you. The Kadri injury was because if exactly what they needed, a productive player in the third, in the middle for them. So, but now it casts some questions. And not only that, Dallas is getting hot. Dallas is hotter and Colorado's lost a couple of games here. I think with all that cap space, I got to suspect that Joe Sakic's going to do something. If it's shoring up the center, I get it. I understand it. I think he's got to get another scorer. Now, Toffoli's off the book, so maybe that would be a natural resting place for Chris Kreider or landing place for Chris Kreider. Depends on what the Rangers want to do here, because I don't think they've made up their mind with respect to Kreider at this point.
Right. And lurking maybe for Colorado, if they're willing to pay up, could be a guy like Pajot. That could be a good fit. He can play all over the lineup and kill penalties.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's Pajot would be a fit. I agree. It just depends on, here's the thing with Ottawa. You want to hear, you're asking for a first-round pick for this guy. But let's be real here. Like, the season that Pajot's having, he's not that player.
No.
He's not a 30-goal scorer, right? And just like that, the people people that might have been fooled with Duclair, who fell off the face of the earth the last month, right, after that great, 3 months. So that's the issue. That's the challenge. And I get it. Dorian wants a first-round pick for the guy. That's a hefty price to pay for JP Pajot. I think he's a really nice fit. He would help. He would help Colorado if it's a long-term issue with Nas. I would be careful on the price because, again, you would slot him back into the third line, and you want to give up a first-round pick for a third-line center. I'm not sure you want to do that. And it depends what you think about Colorado. I'll submit to you. Do you think Colorado can win the Stanley Cup this year? Are they that good? I'm not sure. Right? They're not.
It depends on the goaltending.
Yeah, see, exactly. So if I'm making a trade, I'd probably want to trade for a goaltender at this point in time and a scorer. So that I think my center position, given the other guys that are in the lineup, I think I would rather defer on that.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Now, I heard you on the always terrific Hot Stove Show. Make sure you check it out on Saturdays on Sirius XM Radio. Mention that the Flyers would be looking to add bottom 6 forward help. And that certainly makes sense with what we're hearing locally. Any names come to mind?
I've got a couple guys here in L.A. maybe you want to hear about. I mean, I would think that a guy like Trevor Lewis would be one of the guys. Like, that could play every forward position. He's not the most productive player, but, I'll be honest with you, you need more defensive players on the Flyers than scorers at this point in time. So I think that would be a good quality move. And you're probably talking about a 4th-round pick for Trevor Lewis. So I think that would be a possible move for them. With respect to the rest of the teams, I'm not sure. I mean, you want to revisit Wade Simmons? I don't think so. I just think that I would want to have more defensive-type players on the ice. And the guy I would look at here in Los Angeles would be a guy like Trevor Lewis.
Now, the Flyers seem to have a real problem at third-line center. Is he good enough to man that position, or should the Flyers aim a little higher, like maybe a Barclay Goodrow, a Chris Tierney from Ottawa? Are they realistic?
Yeah, I'm not. I know Goodrow scored a big goal last year in the playoffs to send to the second round. I'm not sure. Chuck's going to make some big moves here. I think that the way the team's constituted, you want to add a third line center. I get it. I understand it. I don't think he's going to. I don't think you're going to overpay for a player at this point in time. I get it. I get there's some gaps on the bottom six. I would rather get a more versatile player like a Lewis that can play with center and wing than a guy like Gaudreau. And I think the price. It depends on price. That's the issue, right? I would not overpay for Barclay Goodrow with respect to this team. I don't think he's that much of a difference maker. Would he help? He would help, right? But again, I think they got to be price sensitive to this marketplace because it looks like it's going to be, a little bit of a seller's market at this point.
Yeah. I can see that. Shane Gostisbehere seems like not going to be a factor at the trade deadline. He has a knee that really hasn't quite healed up yet. And I do think that while he's in his last year in Philadelphia, that's something that's going to have to be settled over the summer.
Yeah, I think that's something. Yeah, it's not a trade deadline situation. No, not for Ghost. You might see it in Montreal. We'll be at the draft in Montreal. I think right now at the deadline, I think he's just stuck in Philadelphia at this point in time, unless somebody wants, again, short of some overpayment, which I don't see happening from a team. But I think they have to address that by the time we get to free agency on July 1st.
Yeah. So look at finishing up the East. We mentioned Kreider, Pajot, and of course you talk about Lundqvist. That's a situation where I think you nailed it. I mean, if he wants to go someplace where he could win a cup, why not go to the Avalanche?
Absolutely.
He'd have a job there for at least the next couple of years.
Here's the thing. Let's state the obvious here. Okay, Hank is going to control his destiny, right? Whether he stays in New York or not. That's a fact, right? Number two, he's not going to win a Stanley Cup in New York, even if he stayed there, which he won't because now the Russian kid is now is the number one anointed by David Quinn.
Right.
He's not going to win a Stanley Cup there. So does he again? And this is what we addressed before here. Like, does he want to? How important is it for Hank to win a Stanley Cup? He's richer than he could ever imagine. He's won a gold medal. He's a hero in 2 countries. And here's the thing: he loves New York. He is so ingrained in New York that I'm not sure that he wants to leave New York. I think it's a situation where you might have to have Georgiev be the guy who leaves because the other guy's your starter at this point in time. And if Hank doesn't want to leave and he's got an $85.5 million cap hit, you got to move Georgiev here, maybe even at the deadline. So I think that it depends on the team. And I agree. I've said this for 6 weeks. Like, that's the team. And now with the injury to Grubauer, it's a no-brainer. It's not a no-brainer, but it makes a lot of sense to send over Hank there. And not only that, he's not sending, they wouldn't be sending him to Colorado. To Edmonton or Calgary or Florida. He said that Denver's a nice place. Right? It's a nice place to live. It's a cosmopolitan city. I think Hank would enjoy it there. And I think that's part of it, right? He's not going to go to some outpost even if they have a good team. Right, so that's the other challenge. That's the other issue. He's got to like where he lives as well, and nothing really compares to New York. And I'm biased because I'm in New York, and I get it. He's so ingrained in New York. That's the issue. Like this, when it comes down to it, does Hank really want to leave? But they have to have a conversation. Maybe they've already had it, and they're just waiting for the buyers to come in and do that. So I think that's what we sit with respect to Hank. But I just think that he will not finish his career in New York unless he wants to. I just don't see that happening because, I think he does want to win because I think you could see that sometimes this team struggles defensively. You could see the emotions in Hank. I think that as long as he likes the city he would play in and it was a contender, that he'd be amenable for a trade at this point.
Yeah, well, that'll be a situation that bears watching. It literally could make trade deadline day if the King was moved. But just a couple more from me, DB. The Bruins always seem to want to add this time of year. They did a great job with Charlie Coyle last year. And Columbus Blue Jackets have a lot of injuries, but they also have a lot of cap space. Either one of those teams going to be busy between now and next Monday.
Well, guys, here's the thing with Columbus. Why do they have to trade? They traded everybody last year. They don't have any assets. They don't have any picks. I get it. They could add, but what do you if you're Keck, what do you send them back to another team? Yeah. That's the challenge. That's the issue. Right? I mean, that's really what's going on there. So that's part of the issue, right? And I like that team. And look, you want to reward that team for they hung in, because I'll tell you, like nobody gave them a chance, right? From day one, everybody left. Breadman left. This team is stink. It's no good. Zingle left. Everybody left. There's no way. And they're in a playoff spot right now. And Seth Jones goes down. And Anderson hasn't played at all. Like this. So the one thing as a general manager, I think they're doing that with the Rangers, is like you want to reward this team for hanging in and say, look, I believe in you guys. And he did it last year, right? He believed in them. It was more important last year because they had not won last year. Right? They had not won a playoff series. So that was important for them, for the market, for the fan base, for everybody, right? So that was important for them, right? So at this point, like, do you do it again? I just don't see how they have the assets to do it. And that's what's probably going to prevent them from going big in this market. Like, I don't think they could be a player for Chris Kreider because they don't have the picks or anything else there. So, so that's part of the challenge, part of the issue with Columbus.
Right, yeah. I mean, they have their first, but they don't have their second. They don't have their third. And then if you look at next year, I think they're missing their second or something like that. And like you say, you can only go down that well so many times. And the Bruins apparently are talking about Kreider. I don't know how seriously. But
yeah, well, look, I know that one of the reasons that Tyler Toffoli's in Vancouver right now is that the Bruins had soured on Toffoli. They scattered him. They didn't like the way he was playing. Now, granted, he's played goals like that. I'm not sure what the Bruins do. I can't see. I mean, the Rangers and Bruins have been trade partners before, right? So I could see that possibly happening, right? I mean, that it's because I'll tell you that behind the perfection line, they need help. They need help on the wings. You know, I think they need more help on the left wing than right wing. But I think that now that the Bruins are starting to play good again, they had that little trough where, look, here's the deal. Like, that line, as great as it is, can't produce for 82 games like that. They're insane, right? You know, Pasternak wasn't going to score 82 goals, right? So you're going to have this trough. But now they're back on track. And I think what they saw is that Tampa heated up, so this team kind of got a little bit of a wake-up call at this point in time. But when you look at their depth, yeah, look, if they don't win, if they don't go back to the Cup final, you know what's going to happen because, you know, they've got, you know, Carson Kuhlman playing on the right wing sometimes. You have, you know, Denton Heinen, who hasn't had a good season. You know, but behind that, look, Jake DeBrusk has been solid for them, but they don't have a right winger. So the left wing they're kind of set with Jake and with Marchand. So if you want to put, you know, Kreider in the third line and playing with Charlie Coyle, then yeah, there's a possibility there. Anders Bork's a decent player. So there's possibilities there, but I just think with respect to Boston, I think they just might stand pat at this point in time. I don't think they're going to go big. I don't think they're going to be the landing place for Chris Kreider. I still like Colorado for Chris Kreider.
Okay, gotcha. And Boston's got some challenges cap-wise. The only guy,
cap-wise too.
Yeah, would they move Torrey Krug and that $5 million salary, a pending UFA, to make that work, or would they just be kind of hoisting themselves on their own petard?
Yeah, they would. I don't think that would help them. I mean, you're going to be playing quality teams here. The East is no joke. You know that, right? This year, like all the powers in the East, I think you just give it a run with that. I would not give up a roster player for this. I would give up a first-round pick, a really high prospect maybe, but to pull a roster player off to get a player to help you offensively, I don't think I don't think you do that. And I get it. Cruz probably going to leave. He's going to get paid a lot of money. But I would not do that at this point in time if I'm Don Sweeney. I would just really protect my assets at this point in time.
Gotcha. Two more from me, DB. The Montreal Canadiens, there's some rumors out there about Domi being moved out. They're not happy with them. I'm not really sure if that's posturing for contract or what the deal is with Max.
Max loves playing there. And if you ever hear like the complaints in the market that nobody ever wants to come to play to Montreal, no. The guy you would trade would be Thomas Tatar, right? He's got one more year left on his deal. He's been very productive. He's cap friendly with respect to his hit because they retained salary in the Vegas deal. That would be the guy to trade. Like, because Tatar, you know, he's done well there. It doesn't really have any emotional connection. Max is a fighter. He scraps. He loves playing there. Look, never say never. Has to have a big overpayment for Max, for Max Domi. That would not be the guy I'll be targeting if I'm Berge to trade. It would be Thomas Tatar. It would be Jeff Petrie, who's had a great season. Right, those are the two guys I would want because Max is younger. He was a semi-bust in Arizona. Came here, started to produce, loves playing there. So if I had to trade two guys off the roster, it would be Thomas Tatar and Jeff Petrie.
Good. Okay, well, the last one I have is a little discussion about the Florida Panthers, 3-6-1 in their last 10, and the name Vincent Trocheck came up, and I thought that was a surprise. I know he's having a rough year. He gets injured a fair amount, but he's been a good player for them. What do you think about him moving on and maybe to help Florida's defense?
Well, the Florida defense needs help, without question. I would not do it now. Right. I don't think this is a trade deadline deal. Vinny wears an A there. He has been injured. He's on a nice contract, though. He's got 2 more seasons at a 4.75 cap hit, right? I would not make that move, right? Not now. Like, I want to see how Q coaches this team and how they do in the postseason. And I agree with you. The defense is shaky, and you got 2 defensemen playing up front some nights, and it's he's the mad scientist Q behind the bench. But I'll tell you this, it comes down to one guy. The goaltender. Like, is the goaltender, is that looking like a good contract right now? No, not really. When he plays good, they win games. Right? It's as simple as that. It's going to come down to 2 guys. How the coach coaches this team in the playoffs, because I assume they're going to make it. If they don't, then it's a disaster because they went all in. And how does Bobrovsky play? Does he earn this $10 million a year, and he's contracted to what, 2026?
Yeah. That's
really tough. That's going to be a tough contract because he is 31 years old now. Goaltenders can play into the mid to late 30s. But to trade Vinny Trocheck off this team because he's part of the fabric of this team would be dangerous in season. I think if you want to make that move and let's see what they do in the postseason. Maybe they catch fire. Maybe the goaltender stands on his head and has a run like Vegas did a couple of years ago with Fleury because he has done it before. He is a Vezina winner. I'm not trying to sell him short here. But to trade Vinny Trocheck at this point in time, given how important he is to that team off the ice as well as one of the leaders, that would be a question mark. Then something must have happened with respect to him, with respect to his status on the team, that Dale would look to trade him. Because that would be, to me, an off-season move. And again, his contract would lend itself towards an off-season trade, right? And I wouldn't want to be traded. If I think I'm a contender, despite how bad my defense is, I want Vinny on my team to help me win. Right, so that would not be a move I would make at this point in time. If they flop, if they miss, if they go out in one round, Adanoff are unrestricted free agents. So if those guys are gonna leave, and I assume Hoffman's gonna leave and get paid, I'm not sure about Dadanoff, then you're gonna be down 3 forwards. So you have to look at the big picture here. And again, if you think this team is a cup contender, and they say they're quasi cup tender, you would make that move. Right. So I think that's the other issues. With those other 2 guys pretty certain to be departing, I don't think you can go and have another 3rd guy. And then you're looking in June saying, how am I going to place 3 pretty good offensive players up front?
No, definitely got a point there. These names come up. You just don't know what's real and what's not. And with that, what do you think is going to happen? Is this going to be a slow trade deadline, as many pundits are saying?
I would not get up early on the 24th and tune into TSN or SA or Sportsnet or whoever you're going to do, the NHL Network. Yeah, because I think, look, you see what today, Toffoli just moved, right? So and we're a week out. So I think what you'll see is this. I think you'll see some more big moves here in the next couple of days leading up to the 24th. I think you'll see depth guys go, like the rentals, the lower price rentals. You'll see some changing addresses and things of that nature. Will we have some watershed deal on the 24th? No, because here's the thing. I don't think Chris Kreider's they're going to wait till the 24th to trade Chris Kreider if they do. And I'm of the mindset that they should keep him because with the bread man, he's going to need other good players around him. He's playing hard. He's playing like he wants to be there. Right, and that's the other challenge. The other issue is that if the Rangers lose a couple games here, are they going to make the playoffs? Probably not. Do you want to reward this team and say, we want to keep this guy in town and we want to extend him? Yeah, he's not a 31-year-old free agent. He's still in his 20s, and I just think he's a really productive player. So to answer your question, given the history of trade deadline day, where I always watch TSN and James Duthie's always making jokes because nothing ever happens until an hour beforehand. So again, I think the Pajot and the Kreider deals come before the 24th. We might see some activity. We might see 15 or 20 deals, but they're going to be lower echelon players, some depth players for the contenders to add on at a lower price.
All right. Yeah. That sounds like what a lot of people are thinking. And by the way, what I'm getting from this is from Andy Strickland, because I'm not really good at multitasking. A second-round pick, Tim Schaller, plus a prospect is part of the package going back to L.A. for Toffoli. You got
Tyler Madden I hear Tyler Madden is the prospect going out, who's a pretty decent prospect.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Any relation to John?
I don't think so. I'll have to check on.
Okay. Well, DB, thanks so much for doing this. Where can people follow you on Twitter, and tell us about thefourthperiod.com?
Absolutely. Dennis TFP, my Twitter handle. Thefourthperiod.com, I have a column there, usually LA-based, but maybe since we're up against a trade down, a little bit more league-wide. As you mentioned, the Hot Stove on SiriusXM, 11 to 1 Eastern on Saturdays. I co-host with my friends Ryan Payton and Dave Pagnotta, who's the main man at TFP. And also Kings of the Podcast. Me and John Hoven do a nice job entertaining and informing people about what's going on in Los Angeles. And again, our last one that we did on Saturday at the Falcon Stadium had a lot of trade talk as well. So, and then hopefully you and I will reconvene after the trade deadline to assess winners and losers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely got to do this again. DB, thanks so much.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for the time, buddy. Great talking to you.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Well, you heard the man. A lot going on there. Chef, Dan had to go attend to some things that are brotherly puck related. Just to get some thoughts before we move on to the schedule and wrap it up for tonight.
Interesting. I thought that the Flyers, like I know you brought it up, it was funny. I was texting you about, Goodrow.
Yeah.
At the time, and I was thinking, it's something where they can fit under a cap, a little tweaking here and there, especially if, Ghost goes on long-term injured reserve or something like that, have a little bit more freedom or whatever they're going to do. I was surprised because I think, the Flyers could really go for that third center. And I think what the real question is, especially with the after the practice today with Nolan Patrick coming out and saying he still thinks he's going to play this year. And I think Dan, it's a shame he's not here right now. I wish I could have asked him. He had talked about the math involved with like 43 days left in a season, 23 games and stuff like that.
Right.
Whether or not, Patrick realistically would even make an impact on the Flyers, let alone the Phantoms, because AV did say he was going to have to do a stint with the Phantoms to get conditioning back. That's realistic. So
yeah, I tweeted about it earlier. He would have to start practicing regularly. He would have to take contact without being symptomatic, and in that interim, he would have to get in some kind of game shape because he hadn't had a training camp. Then he has to go down to Lehigh Valley and not get injured, and again, take contact without getting hurt. I think all of that would take about at least a month.
Yeah.
And it just doesn't add up to me. Yeah. And I think when you think about how important the player is, I'm not sure if I want to go there anyway. As much as they want to win, I don't know if I necessarily agree with DB. I think Barclay Goodrow for a year at the number he's at. And
he's on a 2-year deal too, and it's only like $925,000.
Right. So
even like the reason I was leaning towards like him as opposed to somebody else flashy, because even if let's just say that Patrick gets back and he plays like 6-7 games or whatever this season, it's still a question mark next year. And obviously we already talked about Frost being not ready now. Who knows next year, because he could still need more development next year. It's not like, and like we said, why rush it? You don't want to do something. So if you can take somebody that's established in the league for that price, that to me that's a steal. I think.
Well, it depends on the cost. It's like anything else. But we got to wrap. Let's take a look real quickly at the Flyers have 23 games left, 13 at home, 10 on the road, And all that's coming in 49 days. And they have 15 of those games versus the Eastern Conference, 10 versus the Metro. But in that interim, they only leave the Eastern time zone once with the Dallas and Nashville gauntlet. And then, but they do have 5 sets of back-to-backs, so that's a challenge. And that's something that, it's something that's is worth considering. But if you look at the competition, the Blue Jackets have 22 games left, 9 at home, 13 away, 13 of those versus the East, 8 in the Metro, and they have 5 back-to-backs as well. The Islanders have 25 games left, 12 at home, 13 away, 15 versus the East, 15 versus the Metro, and they have 6 back-to-backs. Check that, 3. Okay? The Islanders 15 versus the East, 9 in the Metro, and 3 back-to-back. I was reading ahead there. And just 4 more to go. Just want to give you guys an idea what the competition is, it has to deal with. The Penguins, 25 games, 11 at home, 14 away, 21 versus the East, 15 versus the Metro, 6 back-to-backs. So the Penguins are well girded up for what's going to be a tough stretch. Carolina, 24 games, 11 at home, 13 away, 20 versus the East, 12 in division, and 7 back-to-back. That leads the pack in that regard. Florida's got 24, 11 at home, 13 away, 13 versus the East, 10 versus the Metro, only 3 back-to-backs. But right now, Florida's not in the playoffs, even with today's win. So that is what the Flyers are shaping up against. It's going to be interesting what happens between now and the trade deadline. I personally think the Flyers are going to make a minor move. It could be something like a Trevor Lewis. I would not hate the move. I wouldn't love it. It's one of those things where I think they should get something more significant. I think they could go for a guy like Melko Karlsson, but they don't really necessarily want to get a UFA. And here's the good news. The Flyers have a back-to-back, a home-and-home, I should say, not a back-to-back, with Columbus, the Blue Jackets, starting tomorrow night in Philly. Then they go to Columbus on the 20th, and then they play back at home, a matinee versus the Winnipeg Jets, who can't get the puck out of the zone right now. They're, like I mentioned earlier, Connor Hellebuck is their MVP, and he might be the MVP in the league. And then we're back. We're coming back on Monday the 24th. After the trade deadline, we're going to have Dave Isaac from the Courier-Post, one of our favorite guests, and he's going to sum it all up from a Flyers perspective. And, of course, if there's any fireworks during the trade deadline, like maybe Hank agrees to go to Colorado like we envisioned, then certainly we'll talk about that. And I see that Dan has rejoined us after taking care of some brotherly puck business. Dan, any final thoughts before we sign off and give our contact info?
Yeah, I was taking care of some horrible internet business is what was going on here. I was losing you on the call there, so I had to restart the router. But hey, I'm back. Yeah, it's the road ahead's going to be interesting. I mean, this is a huge week for the Flyers here with Columbus, the home and home, obviously. They need to win, and they can't pull another Tampa. They can't pull another New Jersey. They need to go out there, and the Islanders even. They need to go out there and win. And as much as we joke about it on Brotherly Pod about them winning every single game from here on out, they really got to kind of win as many possible games as they can. Hopefully after that they played the Jets and Sharks, Rangers. So hopefully they do have, a skid there where they can hopefully pick up some easier wins. But yeah, this week is absolutely crucial for them moving forward. Yeah,
I'd say five out of 6 points. You really got to have it, and best to get them versus the Blue Jackets. Blue Jackets are missing 4 players.
Yeah.
There's Seth Jones is out, Cam Atkinson is out, of course Korpisalo has been out forever, and it's somebody else as well. But
they're Black and Blue Jackets.
Yeah, Black and Blue Jackets. So we'll be back to talk about these 3 games and the trade deadline, as I mentioned, And with that, Dan, why don't you tell us the Brotherly Pod story and your contact info?
Yeah, you can find me at Dan the Flyer Fan, at Brotherly Puck, at Brotherly_Pod, at Angry Negative. I'll be back tomorrow night with BBW Radio. Oh, Angry Negative tomorrow, BBW Radio on Wednesday. Okay. And, yeah.
Fantastic. Chef?
You can find me at Chef DeLevB on Twitter, and you can also find me at Steam Pub in Southampton, 606 2nd Street Pike.
Fantastic. And you can follow the O&B Puckcast at O&B Puck, at O&B Puck on Twitter. I'm Isaiah. I can be followed at Isaiah, ISAIAH _520, at Isaiah _520 if you want to yell at me about some of the silly things that I can say. And make sure you rate and subscribe to the O&B Puckcast. It's very important to subscribe. It moves us up the charts when people are looking for Flyer podcasts. And the more people that subscribe, the more likely you'll find us on a search. And, of course, it's always free. So with that, we'll see you next week with Dave Isaac after the trade deadline. We got our fingers crossed. Maybe the Flyers can make a move here and improve themselves. But until then, everybody, take care.